Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sociology of Gender. This is on gender and social change. Today, we're going to talk about feminism. Okay, feminism, according to Margaret Anderson, is the belief and action supporting social justice for women. Okay, that's a pretty broad definition that can include many things. Okay, something that's more specific. Um, Something that's more specific is comes from Reed and Purcell from 2004, and I'll talk about them later. Politicized gender consciousness, which is characterized by a sense of interdependence and shared fate with other women, recognition of women's relatively low status and power compared to men, attribution of power differentials to illegitimate sources, such as institutionalized sexism, and an orientation toward collective action to improve women's position in society. Okay, so that definition is more specific, more detailed. Anderson's definition is more broad. There are advantages and disadvantages to having both. Okay. How do people become feminists? Well, there's two ideas here that comes from Catherine Bosendahl and Daniel Miners. Okay, one is interest-based explanations that states that when a person's defined interests benefit from gender equity or from a gender equity ideology, then that individual should hold more feminist values. For example, women favor gender equality more than men because it is in their interest to do so. For example, eliminating the wage gap. Men's interests could be included here too. For example, men benefit from their wives' employment, and if there's an elimination of the gender wage gap, then men will benefit too. It will serve men's interests as well as women's. Okay, exposure-based explanations. This explanation states that people change their understanding of women's place in society and embrace feminism when they encounter ideas and situations that resonate with feminist ideals. This is because of personal experience, like experiencing discrimination in the workforce, to education, in which people are exposed to feminist ideas, like in this class. And 3, socialization, especially learning feminist ideas through the experiences and education of one's mother or having a feminist mother. So, what variables correlate with feminist attitudes? In other words, can we predict someone has feminist attitudes by other related factors? Well, we can with a pretty good certainty, and they fall into 3 particular areas. One is employment. Labor force participation is a big one for women, both because of interest and exposure. It's not really one for men, okay? Men's participation in the labor force does not shape their feminist ideology, but for women it does, okay? Proportion of income and hours worked. Women are more likely to be exposed to discrimination with more hours worked. While men would not experience this directly, it could be an indirect experience through their wives' work. And then spouse work status. A man's work status does little to protect his own and his wife's feminist attitudes, but a woman's work status can have a substantial effect on husband's attitudes. From an exposure perspective, men's employed wives provide them with greater awareness of gender discrimination. And from an interest perspective, men recognize that discrimination against their spouses reduces family income. Okay. What about the family structure? Yeah, 2 things. Marital status is one. Divorced women and men are more likely to embrace feminist ideas because the women are forced into non-traditional gender roles, and men are also influenced to have less traditional views of gender. Okay. Second, children. Some have reasoned that families with more children are more traditional, and others have reasoned that women with more children have less time to engage in activities outside the home, including feminist activities. Background and socialization. Age makes a difference. Younger women are more likely to hold feminist ideas because they are less invested in traditional gender arrangements. Okay. Education. Education exposes us to egalitarian ideals and inhibits myths and stereotypes, but it may change interest structures because women with higher education are more likely to desire careers and have more to gain by eliminating discrimination like the glass ceiling. Mothers' education is another example. Mothers who have higher levels of education and thus greater openness to feminist ideas are more likely to pass those on to their children. When it comes to race, there is a more gender egalitarian stance among African Americans than whites because of more participation in the labor force and higher commitment to egalitarianism in general. Location. Geographical location, the South is less embracing than the rest of the country, and urban environments are more embracing. Religion and religious participation is next. With some exceptions, religious participation reduces support for feminism. Conservative Protestants are least likely to embrace feminism. Jews are most likely, though like race, this is all very complex. And political identification is also a thorny issue because many claim that it's all of these other factors, age, education, race, location, religion, that shape political identification and feminism, rather than political identification shaping feminism. Okay? Or, yeah. So what else to talk about? So this is about okay, so what about, so we got attitudes here. What about identification? To what extent does somebody define themselves as a feminist? There's an increased support for feminist ideas, but, not strong support for the label, okay? This is research by Downing and Rush. Okay, they came up with a stage model of feminist identity development for women, and here's how it goes. A 5-stage model of feminist identity development. First of all is passive acceptance, in which women accepts the dominant societal meaning of traditional gender roles and believes that they are advantageous. Okay, so yeah. They accept that, but then after that they have revelations, those aha moments, those whoa moments. A series of events or contradictions propel the women into a state of dualistic thinking in which men are portrayed positively and women are portrayed negatively. So they kind of like understand, remember that exercise we did at the beginning of the class, that we tend to associate men with the more valued traits. So therefore we value men more. Okay. Next is embeddedness emanation. In this phase, the woman feels strongly connected to other women, and she may choose to surround herself with a self-affirming women's community in order to strengthen her new identity. So she'll surround herself with more women. Sometimes she might live in in a household with all women, and in order to like strengthen the new identity. Then a synthesis occurs. When a woman achieves an authentic and positive feminist identity in which gender role transcendence is coupled with the evaluation of men on an individual basis. Okay, so instead of like generalizing about men positively or negatively. Men are evaluated individually, and then active commitment is the state in which a woman commits herself to meaning action towards feminist goals. So this is one model here. How do women get there? Okay. Here's some research by Anne Reed and Nuala Purcell on pathways to feminist identification. These authors studied, and they found that this is a survey of 101 women taking psychology classes at a New York college, okay? And they found that feminist identification is strongly correlated with the following, okay? First, exposure to feminist ideology, either through reading feminist literature or taking a women's studies course. It's also strongly correlated with the recognition of a common fate with women, okay? That women have this common destiny, or common, that there's something that unites them as women. Illegitimate deprivation, okay, is another one that, saying that, what they're basically looking at sexism in society and saying, hey, that's not fair. There's an injustice going on. And then not having a negative evaluation of feminists, okay? So there are two possible pathways that the authors uncovered. One leading to feminism and one not leading to feminism. So, pathways to feminists. For feminists, okay, so they have a prior exposure to feminist ideology. They realize that they have a common fate with women and have positive evaluation of feminists, and arrives at a self-identification, okay? For other women, there's the exposure to feminist ideology. They recognize women's illegitimate deprivation and fate with women, and they arrive at towards a collective action on behalf of women that does not include a self-identification as a feminist. What's the switching point? The evaluation of feminists, okay? Women who do not identify as feminists are more likely to have a negative view of feminists, okay? So they're not going to embrace that, but they'll still embrace a lot of the ideas. If you hear a woman saying, I'm not a feminist, and then talk about the, the injustices women experience, that's part of the explanation is, you might want to ask if they have a negative evaluation of feminists, okay? So, feminist identity goes through a process of exposure to feminist ideology, realizing a common fate with women, and combined with positive evaluations of feminists, then arriving at feminist identification. Okay, so in contrast to feminism, there is womanism. Okay, it's actually not quite in contrast. I'll get to this in a bit, but that feminism is really a kind of womanism. So this comes from Alicia D. Wozniak, okay, an article of Race and Women's Identity Development, distinguishing between feminism and womanism among Black and white women. Womanism was basically coined by Black women, okay, and where they're valuing the lives and experiences of women. It rejects the separation of women and men, whereas white feminism doesn't necessarily do that. Womanists are also concerned with race and class oppression and those intersections. Okay, womanism can be understood like this: womanism is to feminism as purple is to lavender. Okay, that feminism is like a type of womanism. Okay, so so we had the feminist identity model. Let's look for the womanist identity model, okay, that comes from Janet E. Helms, okay. She has like something here. First, pre-encounter is when the woman conforms to societal views about gender. She thinks and behaves in ways that devalue women and value men. Okay. Then the encounter stage. New information or experiences that make being a woman more salient, which causes her to question her values and beliefs. Emersion is next. The idealization of women and the rejection of male supremacist views of women in search of a positive self-affirmation of women, along with an intense affiliation with other women. And then internalization, in which the woman fully incorporates into her identity her own positive view of what it means to be a woman, and she continues to refuse to be bound by external definitions. So, what's the difference between the Downing-Rush model and this model by Janet E. Helms? Okay, well, here's how it breaks down. In the Downing-Rush model, the woman adopts feminist views, while in the womanist model, the woman adopts whatever positive views of womanhood she defined for herself. Okay, so and there's not that really synthesis stage because that kind of polarization between men and women never really did happen in womanism. Okay, that's part of the rejection of that separation between men and women. Okay, but what's more, because many black women see feminism as rather irrelevant to their lives, they support the premises of the women's movement, but do not identify with being a feminist. Okay. As one YouTuber that I sometimes show, but I'm not going to show today, says she's a womanist first, feminist second. Okay. Some of this is a critique of feminism being focused on white women's issues. For example, the second wave feminists, so Betty Friedan and those the like of that, who were like focused on, the experience of women having to be basically kept at home, doing the housework, raising the children, and things. But poor and minority women have always worked in the United States, and black women have always worked. So that was not an issue for black women, okay, because they always worked. Issues that they had, that they also worked on, had to do with racial oppression and class oppression, in which white feminism wasn't doing at that time. So when white women were complaining about being forced to stay home and not allowed in the workforce, minority women really could not relate to that experience because they are working. And that's just one example. Okay. So, what about men? What are the pathways to feminism for men? First, this is understudied, not really studied empirically. There are many feminists who believe that men couldn't be feminist, and some men identify as pro-feminist rather than feminist. Okay, Michael Kaufman wrote an article called Men, Feminism, and Men's Contradictory Experiences with Power, and he theorizes what's going on here. First of all, that men have power and privilege, but it comes at a price. Okay. In the pursuit of hegemonic masculinity, men must suppress their emotions and they must hide their pain. Okay. So that's their price. Okay. Pain, fear, alienation. Okay. That kind of thing. Okay. Remember those 4 kinds of masculinity I talked about, coming from Ray Winconnell, and hegemonic masculinity is the highest pursuit. Okay, so that's what they got to do to pursue hegemonic masculinity. So, and as I said, the suppression of emotions makes us less human. we become alienated, men become alienated from women, alienated from men, and alienated from themselves. So how does this lead to men embracing feminism? Women have really changed the world. And another thing women have changed is the balance between men's power and pain. In societies in which men's power has gone unchallenged, the rewards for hegemonic masculinity was so great that it was worth the suppression and pain that came along with it. Kaufman says, quote, as men's power is challenged, those things that came as a compensation, a reward, or a lifelong distraction from any potential pain are progressively reduced or at least called into question. Okay, so for many men, the pursuit of hegemonic masculinity is no longer worth the cost. Okay, and worth the suppression of emotions, the denial of emotional needs, so the denial or the alienation. So the answer is feminism, because going back to something Floyd Dell said that was told to you in the Michael Kimmel video, feminism will make it possible for the first time for men to be free. So that's that. So that's my last lecture. I also want you to watch a TED Talk, and I'm going to post this in the module. It's by Kimberly Crenshaw on intersectionality. Okay, so there you might get more of an idea of what feminism is, and also reading the last two chapters of the Anderson text will add to your understanding too. So put all that together. You'll need all this for the final exam. So thank you very much, and I will see you on Canvas. Bye.